Starliner Media. Starliner Media presents Music Night at the Majestic with your host, Michael Boswell.
All right, time once again for Music Night at the Majestic, and with me tonight, Joe Chambers. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
Hey, not a problem. For the folks who aren't familiar with, Joe is a songwriter. His current big project is he is the founder of the Musicians Hall of Fame in Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I think is fantastic about the museum is it is not specific to just music made in Nashville, but it is all types of music all around the country, and no matter what type of music you may be partial to, there's something there for everybody. So tell the folks about what when they do get to the museum, what's waiting for them.
We have Motown, and the instruments that are in here are not replicas. Nothing in here is a replica. It's all the actual instruments that were used to create those songs. And so our little slogan is "Come see what you've heard." So you can come and see the instruments that you've been listening to, and the instruments serve two purposes. That's the artifacts, but also they are used and meant to teach you about the musician who owned them and played them, because to them they were just a tool. It was, and like people like Glenn Campbell, they could play anything and it would sound great. And so by anything, I mean any brand. It's going to sound like Glenn Campbell playing it, So, but once somebody like Glenn Campbell plays it, especially and plays it on a historic record, then it does become an artifact. It becomes a famous instrument. So we made, when it was possible, we tried to make replicas of the front of the studios that if they had an iconic look to them, something you could replicate. So we made the front of Motown and Capitol Records in LA, and Muscle Shoals Sound in Alabama, and Stax and Sun in Memphis. So if you had never been there, it's like walking up to the front of those studios, and then behind that facade is the instruments and the history of what went on there. Now, a lot of people don't know this too, that Jimi Hendrix said that he really learned how to play guitar here in Nashville, and so we have a pretty nice Jimi Hendrix exhibit that features his Nashville years. We went out to one of the clubs that he played at and actually got the stage and the walls and the ceiling above the stage and moved it over here so you could actually see the stage that he said that he learned how to play on.
That's amazing, Joe.
Yeah, that's another story. I won't get into it, but
we'll save it for another time.
Yeah, but and we've got one of his Stratocasters and clothing and all that kind of stuff. So. And he was at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So we tell that story from Fort Campbell to here to New York, and then everybody knows what happened after that pretty much. And we actually have an intact studio in here. It's kind of a weird thing because it's a mobile studio, and it was built by a guy named Brian Ahern, who was a big record producer from Canada. He produced Anne Murray and other people as well in the country market, but in Emmylou Harris in particular, who he ended up marrying. And so he built this mobile studio out of a semi-tractor trailer up in Canada, and then moved it to LA and then all over the country, and rented it out for other people to use too. Like Willie Nelson did his Stardust album with it, and George Jones and Friends album was recorded using it here in Nashville, and all of Emmylou's, most all of her hits and albums were recorded there. and it's inside that we had the building's big enough that we could actually uh, pull it into the building, and it's kind of entombed in here now. It take a lot to get it out, and so you actually get to walk through a real studio. It's not a replica. Another thing that happened that was kind of weird was uh, over time, when people find out that you're looking for things, they'll tell you. And somebody told me that they got one of the last owner of American Studios in Memphis had his son take the vocal booth out and take a lot of the walls out, which consisted mainly of ceiling tile and anyway, we had it stored for 30 years in a tractor trailer, actually, in 60 miles northwest of Memphis. I tell people right in Tornado Alley, it's a wonder that it survived, especially sitting out in the middle of a field. But anyway, I ran him down and bought it. And so if you ever see the Class of 55 movie that Dick Clark did, which had Johnny Cash and the Judds and Marty Stewart and um, Ricky Nelson and a bunch of folks on it. That was, I think, one of the last things that was done in that studio. But you can see the interior of the studio on that clip if you go to on YouTube somewhere. And so we have this massive wall and sound booth, a vocal booth that was where Elvis stood and sang "Suspicious Minds" and "In the Ghetto" and songs like the Box Tops, um, "The Letter" and "Son of a Preacher Man," Dusty Springfield, and Neil Diamond, "Sweet Caroline," and so forth. All these songs were recorded in there, and the building's gone, but the interior is here in the museum.
You've got the heart and soul of it.
Yeah, and when you're standing there, I mean, when the guys came in and saw it, when the Memphis, they were like freaked out, because they thought it was long gone, but there it was, And then Mike Curb, you know who Mike Curb is?
Yep.
Mike told the Grammys about our museum. In like 2014 or so, and anyway, they came out and we partnered with the Grammys. So we've got about a 9,200 square foot Grammy gallery, which is all interactive. And it's, if you've been to the Grammys in LA or probably other places that they have satellites now, like us, you kind of know what it is, but you can sing with Ray Charles or you can play instruments and all kinds of stuff. So for us, it was a perfect hand in glove fit because a lot of the kids are not going to care about the Funk Brothers from Motown or the Nashville A-Team or whatever, or whatever. So that makes it where the adults can, and real music freaks can enjoy, seeing Elton John's piano that he used at Caribou Studio, or James Jamerson's bass from Motown, or Hal Blaine's drums, or Don Felder's guitar from Victim of Love, and Les Paul, Creedence, just whatever, Tom Petty's one of his guitars and clothing.
It's an amazing collection, Joe.
People seem to enjoy it. That if you're a music nut, then yeah, it's really, it's almost something for everybody.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, you mentioned YouTube before, and on YouTube, there's a lot of videos, but your series, the Backstage.
Well, yeah, what happened was when I first decided I was going to do this, I didn't know anything about museums. I mean, I've been to one when I was a kid, that had arrowheads and canoes and stuff. And so I needed to find out if I was going to build a museum, what do I need to do? What are people expecting? So obviously I went to the Country Hall. I went to Stax Museum, which is a beautiful museum in Memphis,
Mm-hmm.
and went to the Motown, and I went to, which is the actual. I mean, that's it. I mean, it's like Sun. It's
Right.
the real deal, and in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is also beautifully done. And so I wanted to see what made up a museum, and basically it was the simple answer to me. I told people was hallways and stuff. So if you can acquire the stuff, then you can. I just needed to build the hallways and build them in an attractive way.
Right.
And but also I noticed they all had video screens. I'm like, well, I'm gonna have to interview some people. That's what people want. So I was not an interviewer, and I was not a cameraman. You can tell. And but I just started doing it just to build up the archives for the museum. I expected all those videos to just be seen in the museum. YouTube was not a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even want my voice heard. I didn't want to be seen. I just was going to edit it to where you just heard. I would ask the interviewee to repeat the question that I would give them so that I could cut me out of it. I didn't even wear a mic, but somehow or another, you can still hear me on most of these videos.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Now,
Now, J.I. Allison was the very first one, wasn't it?
AI was the very first one, and what happened there was we were going to do it on the. I had it planned out. I had that booth built for that reason, and but Fleetwood Mac was in town, and I knew that Mick Fleetwood was a big fan of J.I. And so he was coming over to the museum because we had put an exhibit up about one of the guys that used to be in the early Fleetwood Mac band. And so I knew he was going to be here. But I also know how it is when you're on tour. You don't, and people are dragging you from.
Right.
And, and I wasn't, Ahmet Erdogan. I mean, I didn't have, he didn't know me from Adam. But when he came over, I said, Jai, why don't you come on over and let's do an interview? I'm at least going to introduce you. I think that Mick would really enjoy it. And maybe he'll sit down and do part of the interview with us, at the same time. And but the governor had a party here that morning. There was like 400 people out front where we would have been taping it. So we had to go back in the green room and in the very back and throw up a curtain and a logo just to to pull it off. And then so I took Mick back there and he did freak out over meeting J.I. and he was very nice to him and J.I. it was a fun thing. And I got and we did get a little film of it, but we were all just standing around talking. He didn't have time to actually sit down and do. And at that time, the show hadn't even been done before, so there was nothing to show him to what it would have been like, So
Right.
But yeah, that was the first one. Now, I had interviewed J.I. in what became the Vault series years before.
Okay.
And along with Joe B. and Sonny Curtis, all the cricket guys that were around. And also Cropper, and also Dwayne Eddy. All those guys who were going to have exhibits here, I'd already done them, but we went back and we re-interviewed them, which is fun because we've been able to use all of them. We have a Dwayne Eddy backstage interview today, and then we've got some Vault interviews that I did with him starting 16 years ago, and some more in between there. So and the same thing with Cropper, so we had the Vault series, and then we had the new show. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
People are always going to remember things and say things that they forgot about the first time, or something else has happened in the meanwhile.
Right.
So
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, for our viewers, for anybody watching who hasn't seen those backstage clips, you need to go to the Musicians Hall of Fame YouTube channel and check them out. Because if you enjoy this show, you're really going to enjoy those interviews. Because Joe, you get coming from the musician's perspective, you can relate to your guests on that level. And them talking about their gear and what happened in the studio and all that stuff. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I had a lot of comments on people, and that was one reason again to do it. Like I said, I never thought that I would be an interviewer or anything, but and still don't really. I just ask questions that being a musician that I want to know, and I figured that if other musicians are watching, then they may want to know the same thing. And so that's just the premise of it. I never have taken a note on the show. We just start and just like we did, you and I did.
Yep, I prefer to do it that way because that way it doesn't come across as rehearsed. You just roll with what you got, and it's more conversational.
Luckily, I knew most everybody that I've interviewed so far. That makes it easier. But the few that I didn't, I'd spend about 15 minutes and read a Wikipedia to see what the strum horns were. But I didn't want to. I was hoping that things would come up that weren't,
right.
They had already been. Sorry.
You want to avoid the formula stuff or the stuff that people have already heard 5,000 times.
Yeah. And also, I kind of figured that I'd be asking questions they hadn't been asked anyway.
Exactly.
I don't think that a non-musician would think about. So, what kind of strings, how do you set your, this.
Right.
Just things that gearheads would want to know. But at the same time, I wanted to make it where.
You got to be accessible for people who really like music, but maybe aren't as, technically knowledgeable, if you will.
I used to watch A&E Network on Sundays, and I watch women weaving baskets and stuff, and I'm like, I'm not going to do this. But I'd sit there and just, gel out watching it. And I figured, well, heck, if I watch that, maybe some of those ladies would watch James Burton talk about playing with Elvis,
Mm-hmm.
So, and
exactly.
not they were going to pick up a guitar, but just, so that was kind of how I tried to do it. I didn't want to make it where it was boring to people that weren't musicians, and I didn't want to make it just the same old Entertainment Tonight interview.
Exactly.
No, it's not slamming them, but I'm just saying that, I think they don't want to talk about how they met a groupie or something,
Exactly. So, well, say that's what we try to do with Music Night, because I say our viewers are very hardcore, passionate people, and they appreciate it when it's presented to in a way that they can relate to, and maybe learn something that they didn't already know.
Yeah. Well.
So, I'll tell you what, Joe, on that note, we've, gone, I just realized how long we've been talking here. I got caught up in the conversation and didn't realize, but, I do want to thank you for coming on board, for the show here. Everybody, if you are in, Nashville, absolutely go see the Musicians Hall of Fame. We've had the website and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, all that stuff across the bottom of the screen throughout the show. So please go there, check it out. Go to the YouTube channel, watch Joe's interviews. You will enjoy them. Joe, anything else that we missed?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, what's that?
I think you got it covered there.
All righty. We'll tell you what, on that note, we will bring this episode to a close. Everybody, thank you for watching. Joe, thank you for being here. Everybody, have a good night.
All right, man. See you.
This has been Music Night at the Majestic with Michael Boswell. If you enjoyed this edition of Music Night at the Majestic, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and at musicnight.net. Music Night at the Majestic is a copyright production of Starliner Media. Any use of the accounts and descriptions of this program, its audio or visual content, without the express written consent of Starliner Media is prohibited. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you next time. For Music Night at the Majestic, this is your announcer speaking. Starliner Media.